I think about, man, I have to perform songs every single night or every other night.
The house lights drop and the crowd roars, but Bruno Mars barely hears it anymore. Every night, or every other night, it's the same ritual: sequins, spotlights, and a microphone that feels heavier than it should. He thinks about the next 2 hours, about how the smile has to stay perfect even when his voice is cracking and his heartbeat is a runaway drum. People know Bruno Mars, the flawless performer who can flip a stadium with a single note. Almost nobody knows the man behind the glitter, the kid who once sang for spare change and slept in places most people wouldn't dare to walk after dark. At 39, Bruno has decided to break the silence. Not a carefully staged interview or a glossy magazine spread, but a raw account of the life that built the legend and nearly destroyed it. The truth isn't just about unpaid debts or the heartbreak of Jessica walking away. It's about nights of hunger that left his stomach aching, the childhood wounds that pushed him to chase applause like oxygen, and the addiction that threatened to erase everything he fought to create. For decades, he's carried a family secret so heavy it shaped every note he sings. He remembers the moment the idea settled in. Tell it all. Tell it before the music swallows you whole. Backstage in a cold arena corridor, he stares at the set list and wonders whether the audience can sense the war behind his eyes. They see an icon at the height of his powers. They don't see the boy who once counted pennies for bus fare or the man who gambled away more than money. "People think they know me," he murmurs to no one in particular, pulling his sequined jacket tight. "They don't," the stage manager signals. The intro beat thunders. Bruno exhales, steps into the blaze of light, and begins to sing, carrying a lifetime of secrets beneath the polished smile. Long before the world called him Bruno Mars, he was just Peter Jean Hernandez, a wiry little boy running barefoot through the humid streets of Waikiki. At 4 years old, when most kids are still learning to write their names, Peter is already a veteran of the stage. His family has a nightly musical act in a small Honolulu club, and he's the spark that keeps the crowd glued to their seats. The regulars start calling him Little Elvis because he doesn't just sing, he channels the king. Tiny, glitter-studded jumpsuit, slicked hair, the famous hip swivel. The first time he nails the move, the audience erupts like a fireworks show. He feeds on that energy. 2 shows a night, 5 nights a week, becomes his version of recess. He studies Elvis concert videos instead of cartoons, practicing the curled lip and the microphone twirl until it feels like muscle memory. On stage, he's fearless, but backstage he's still a child who craves juice boxes and falls asleep with his guitar on his lap. By the time he's 5, his talent outgrows the small club. In 1990, at the Aloha Bowl halftime show, 40,000 football fans watch a pint-sized dynamo steal the spotlight. Cameras flash, reporters swarm, and Peter soaks it in, barely tall enough to reach the microphone stand. A year later, he's charming a national TV audience on the Arsenio Hall show, trading jokes with the host as if he's been doing talk shows his whole life. Hollywood notices. In 1992, the filmmakers of Honeymoon in Vegas offer him a tiny role as a mini Elvis. 1 day of work earns him $600, an unimaginable fortune for a kid whose friends are still mastering the alphabet. He jokes later that it was his first Las Vegas residency, and for a moment it feels like destiny is already written. But what really matters isn't the money or the applause. It's the foundation being poured into his young soul. Night after night of live performance teaches him timing, stamina, and the unspoken dialogue between artist and audience. Every cheer, every gasp is a lesson. He learns to read a crowd before he learns to multiply. Other children spend their evenings playing tag or chasing waves on the beach. Peter spends his under the burning stage lights, soaking up every rhythm his family band can throw at him. Rock, reggae, doo-wop, Motown. His siblings tease him for taking the music so seriously, but he can't stop. Even at 6, he senses that the stage is more than entertainment. It's survival, purpose, and pure joy rolled into one. By the time he approaches his 10th birthday, He's logged close to 1,000 performances, more shows than many seasoned artists manage in a lifetime. That relentless schedule carves something deep inside him, an instinct to keep moving, keep singing, no matter how tired or small he feels. Years later, as he rehearses for the Super Bowl halftime extravaganza that will mesmerize millions, he tells a friend it feels like child's play. "This is recess to me," he laughs, because after all, he's been in training since preschool. The crowds adore him, and from the outside it looks like a charmed beginning. But Peter can't yet know how quickly the spotlight can flicker, or how sharply life will pivot when the music stops. For now, the stage belongs to him, and the boy who will become Bruno Mars is too busy chasing melodies to imagine the storms waiting just beyond the footlights. When Peter turns 12, the world he knows collapses overnight. His parents, once united on stage, unravel off stage. The divorce is sudden and messy, and the family act, the nightly heartbeat of his childhood, ends without a final curtain call. One week he's dazzling tourists under Waikiki's lights, the next the stage is dark, the phone silent, and the rent unpaid. Money dries up first, instruments get pawned, gigs vanish. Peter watches neighbors close their doors while his own family drifts between borrowed spaces. His father, once the band leader, now counts change for gas. Peter and his older brother follow him from one temporary refuge to another. There's no set address, only a mental map of places where they might crash for a night. Sometimes it's the yellow '93 Cadillac, its cracked vinyl seats reeking of salt and motor oil, where they stretch out as best they can. Other nights, they find an empty rooftop in Waikiki, huddling beneath a sky that feels both endless and merciless. The strangest stop is an abandoned bird zoo. Broken cages rust in the moonlight, and peacocks scream through the dark, their eerie calls echoing across the empty pens. Peter tries to sleep through the noise, pulling his jacket over his ears. But the cries settle into his memory like a soundtrack he can't mute. Bathrooms are a luxury. The trio slips into hotel pool areas, timing their entrances like secret agents just to grab a quick shower. Dinner is often nothing more than Spam musubi from a 7-Eleven, cheap, salty fuel that keeps them moving. For 5 straight months, they live without electricity. At night, Peter practices guitar by moonlight, fingers numb but determined, the instrument his only anchor. School offers no relief. His thrift store clothes mark him as different, and classmates whisper or laugh. Some days he pretends not to hear, other days the taunts sting deep. Still, music remains a stubborn refuge. He starts impersonating Michael Jackson at small local gigs, moonwalking across tiny stages for $75 a night. Every dollar goes toward demo tapes and bus fare, a fragile investment in a future he refuses to surrender. The hardship forces Peter to grow hard edges. He learns to read people quickly, who might help, who might hustle, who might hurt. He keeps his humor sharp, using jokes to deflect pity. Yet inside he carries a quiet fear that the dazzling boy, wonder everyone once applauded, could disappear into the shadows without anyone noticing. Years later, he will describe those nights as a brutal education. The hunger, the cold, the endless moving. They burn a lesson into him deeper than any music theory class could. Perform or perish, hustle or go hungry. He discovers a resilience that doesn't rely on spotlights or applause. It's the same grit that will drive him through every rejection to come. Even in the darkest moments, small sparks of creativity flicker. Under the pale Hawaiian moon, he strums new melodies on his battered guitar, the notes mingling with the distant ocean's surf. He imagines crowds he can't yet see, stages brighter than the one that vanished, and a name, still unchosen, that will someday light up marquees. For now, though, survival is the only gig. The boy who once owned the stage sleeps beneath a restless sky, dreaming of music powerful enough to carry him out of the dark. By his late teens, Peter is restless. Hawaii feels too small for the dreams he's been sharpening in the dark. Demo tapes circulate quietly among local musicians, and every beat tells him the same thing. It's time to leave. In June 2003, he hugs his mother goodbye and boards a flight to Los Angeles with 3 demo CDs, a cheap guitar, and $600 in his pocket. On the luggage tag, he scrawls a name that still feels experimental: Bruno Mars. The nickname Bruno started when he was a chubby toddler who reminded the family of wrestler Bruno Sammartino. Mars is more personal. A girl once told him he carried himself like he wasn't from Earth, so confident he might as well be from another planet. He likes the sound of it. Bold, slightly cosmic, impossible to forget. Los Angeles greets him with sunlit boulevards and cold realities. His first year is a blur of borrowed couches and paper-thin walls. He bounces through 4 different places to live: a cramped Koreatown studio shared with 6 other dreamers, a friend's converted garage, and a Sunset Boulevard motel that costs $40 a night, too steep for someone who can barely afford food. Some weeks' dinner is nothing more than 99-cent tacos from Jack in the Box. To keep the phone from being shut off, he lies his way into a DJ gig on Van Nuys Boulevard. The club owner asks if he's ever worked a turntable. Of course, he says, even though he's never touched one. 2 nights later, he's fired. But the $75 he earns pays just enough to keep the lights on and the demos circulating. Then a breakthrough, at least on paper. In February 2004, Motown offers a recording contract. The document is only 3 pages long. Bruno jokes to friends that he's seen breakfast menus thicker than that. Still, he calls home, breathless, to share the good news. For a few heady weeks, he walks the city with the quiet swagger of someone who thinks he's finally been discovered. But the label wants something he can't give. They imagine the next Ricky Martin, a Latin pop star who sings in Spanish and fits neatly into a marketing plan. Bruno doesn't write in Spanish. More important, he refuses to let anyone shrink him into a category. He's spent too many nights studying James Brown riffs and Motown harmonies to settle for someone else's formula. 9 months later, the call comes. Motown is dropping him. No single, no album, no explanation beyond, "We don't know what to do with you." Humiliation crashes in. He has to tell his family that the big break he bragged about has evaporated. The sting cuts deep, but beneath it, a small voice insists this might be the best thing that could have happened. Freedom, after all, has its own kind of power. Bruno keeps the name, though. He's no longer Peter the Child performer. Bruno Mars is a declaration, a reminder that he won't be anyone's manufactured star. The rejections harden his resolve. If the industry can't see him yet, he'll make music so undeniable they won't have a choice. The Motown chapter should have been the victory lap, the payoff for every sleepless night on borrowed couches. Instead, it becomes another hard-won lesson in disappointment. For months after signing, Bruno shows up at the label's modest offices with fresh demos, gritty funk one day, breezy pop the next, only to be met with polite nods and vague promises. Meetings end with the same refrain: "We're still figuring out the direction." He waits for studio time that never comes. He studies other artists on the roster, searching for clues about how to break through the fog. The contract that once felt like a golden ticket now feels like a cage. 3 thin pages, no roadmap, no urgency. Friends back home ask when his first single will drop. He gives cheerful answers he doesn't believe. 9 months in, the call finally comes, abrupt and unceremonious. The label has decided to go a different way. No album, no single, no future there. It's over. Humiliation hits first. He'd phoned his family in Hawaii the day he signed, their voices bubbling with pride through the static of a long-distance line. Now he has to confess that the dream fizzled before it even started. He dials home anyway, bracing himself. "They dropped me," he says quietly. His mother pauses, then tells him to keep going, her faith somehow stronger than his own. For a few days, he drifts through Los Angeles like a ghost, headphones on, eyes down. The city that once gleamed like possibility now feels like a maze of dead ends. But under the sting is a sharper truth. He doesn't want to be molded into a marketable Latin pop figure. The failure frees him. He throws himself back into writing, late nights spent dissecting the records he loves, Prince, Michael Jackson, Bob Marley, absorbing every groove, every chord change. He plays tiny shows for tiny crowds, testing songs on ears that don't know his name. Each rejection builds calluses and with them clarity. If he's going to succeed, it will be on his own terms. In hindsight, Bruno calls the Motown deal a blessing in disguise. The drop that once felt like humiliation becomes the moment he reclaims his music. The contract is gone, but the resolve is stronger than ever. He hasn't come this far to let a thin stack of papers define him. Freedom can feel lonely, but it also opens unexpected doors. Not long after Motown lets him go, Bruno crosses paths with another casualty of the same label, a soulful songwriter named Philip Lawrence. Philip carries the same quiet fire, the same bruises from industry indifference. Their first conversation stretches late into the night. Two musicians swapping war stories and unfinished melodies on a dimly lit sidewalk. By the time they part, an unspoken pact hangs between them. Let's make music they can't ignore. They start small. Philip owns a battered 1999 Toyota Corolla that doubles as their brainstorming lounge. On warm Los Angeles evenings, they park outside a tiny Hollywood studio run by engineer Ari Levine. Ari has the equipment, Bruno and Philip bring the ideas. Money is almost non-existent, so they buy Ari burritos from 7-Eleven as payment for late-night recording sessions. It's a strange barter system, but it works. Inside the cramped studio, creativity becomes their currency. Bruno experiments with drum loops and layered harmonies while Philip scribbles lyrics on fast food napkins. They dissect hit records like scientists, studying chord progressions, hooks, and production tricks. 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, they chase a formula that isn't really a formula at all. Music that feels alive. Whenever a groove sparks instant excitement, someone shouts, "That's a smee!" The nonsense phrase sticks, and soon they christen themselves the Smeezingtons. The name is playful, but the work is serious. They analyze more than 1,000 songs, tearing apart everything from classic Motown singles to modern club bangers. Bruno's perfectionism sharpens with each session. Philip's storytelling grows richer. Together they discover a balance that neither could find alone. But the grind is relentless. Rent is always late, and the Corolla becomes both office and lifeline. They eat on the cheap, instant noodles, dollar tacos, and laugh through the exhaustion. At night, Bruno crashes on a friend's futon or a studio couch, dreaming in melodies. He knows they're still nobodies to the industry, yet something about these marathon sessions feels destined. Each beat they create adds another brick to a foundation no label can dismiss. Occasionally, small victories flicker. A local artist records one of their demo tracks. A producer compliments their layered harmonies. Tiny acknowledgments, but enough to keep the fire burning. More important than outside praise is the chemistry inside that studio. 3 young creators forging a sound that blends retro soul with modern pop sparkle. Bruno begins to sense that this partnership is the real turning point, the quiet miracle born from rejection. The boy who once sang Elvis covers for tourists now spends his days crafting songs that carry pieces of every influence he's ever loved. And though the world still doesn't know it, the music they're making will soon explode far beyond that cramped Hollywood room. For now, the Smeezingtons remain an inside secret, their laughter echoing through the night as they chase the perfect hook, certain that when the right ears finally hear these demos, everything will change. After months of late-night sessions and burrito-fueled brainstorms, the Smeezingtons have a catalog of demos, but no clear path out of obscurity. Then, almost by accident, help arrives from inside the family. Bruno's older sister, Jaime, everyone calls her Hay, works in a small fashion boutique in West Hollywood. She listens to every rough track her brother sends and believes with quiet certainty that the world is missing something extraordinary. One afternoon, a regular customer named Mike Lynn stops by the shop. Hay knows his reputation, an industry insider with ties to Dr. Dre's camp. While he flips through racks of clothing, she slips one of Bruno's CDs into his bag and simply says, "You need to hear this." Later that night, Mike pops the disc into his car stereo. The first notes burst out, high, bright, almost too perfect, and he nearly ejects it, thinking the sped-up vocal is some kind of joke. But curiosity wins. He keeps listening. Beneath the slightly raw mix, he hears something different, a voice that slides effortlessly between eras, a songwriter who understands both Motown swing and modern pop punch. By the second track, he's replaying hooks, head nodding in time. Mike calls the number scribbled on the disc. When Bruno answers, half asleep on a studio couch, he thinks it's a prank. But within days, they're sitting across from each other in a coffee shop, Mike explaining how the demos could turn into real placements with major artists. For the first time since Motown, the door to the wider music world creaks open. Momentum builds quickly. Mike passes the demos to producers who matter. A songwriting session leads to another. Industry veterans who once brushed Bruno off now lean in. Intrigued by the blend of retro soul and slick pop he and the Smeezingtons have been perfecting. Each meeting feels electric, as if all those years of moonlit guitar practice and dollar menu dinners were sharpening him for this moment. Still, nothing is guaranteed. Bruno has learned not to confuse interest with commitment. He keeps writing, refining, polishing every melody until it gleams. But he also senses a shift. People who once asked, "Who's Bruno Mars?" now ask, "When can we work with him?" Late one evening, after another marathon studio session, he steps outside into the cool Los Angeles air. The city lights stretch like a constellation of possibilities. For the first time in years, the grind feels less like survival and more like ascent. The boy who once slept in an abandoned bird zoo has carried his music from the rooftops of Waikiki to the heart of the industry. The world doesn't fully know his name yet, but the sound he's forged with Philip and Ari is already rippling through back channels, impossible to ignore. It's the spark before the explosion, the quiet moment when destiny finally leans forward and whispers, "You're almost there." Mike Lynn's introductions open doors to writing rooms Bruno once dreamed about. Soon he's co-writing hooks for B.O.B., Travie McCoy, CeeLo Green, sessions that stretch late into smoky mornings. At first, he's just the kid with a guitar and a knack for melody, but the songs speak louder than resumes. Nothing on You, with its breezy chorus and effortless charm, climbs the charts and introduces millions to a voice they don't yet know belongs to Bruno. Next comes Billionaire, a sly mix of acoustic strum and hip-hop swagger that becomes a summer anthem. Behind the scenes, he's everywhere, layering harmonies, polishing lyrics, teaching artists the subtle rhythmic sway that lives in his head. Each success buys him a little more freedom. Better studio time, a slightly bigger apartment, the chance to replace instant noodles with actual meals. But he's restless. Writing for others is satisfying, yet the itch to step forward grows stronger with every hook that lands on someone else's record. By 2009, the Smeezingtons are an underground force. Producers and labels call them hitmakers, a term Bruno both loves and fears. He doesn't want to be trapped as a behind-the-curtain songwriter. He wants to stand in the spotlight with songs that carry his own name, his own soul. Nights in the studio stretch even longer as he crafts tracks for himself. Music that blends Motown warmth, reggae bounce, and pop precision. The kid who once practiced guitar by moonlight now hears a different kind of light calling him forward. Opportunity arrives like a thunderclap. In 2010, Just the Way You Are hits radio and detonates worldwide. The single rockets to #1 in more than a dozen countries, its tender melody and universal message impossible to resist. Suddenly, the name Bruno Mars isn't a footnote on someone else's album. It's on billboards, award ballots, and screaming fans' homemade posters. His debut album, Doo-Wops and Hooligans, follows, a kaleidoscope of the sounds he's carried since childhood. The doo-wop harmonies of Waikiki nights, the funk he studied in dusty L.A. apartments, the pop shimmer learned from dissecting 1,000 songs with Philip and Ari. Critics hail it as fresh yet timeless. Tours sell out in minutes. But fame arrives with a familiar weight. Endless interviews, grueling schedules, and the ever-present temptation of quick escapes. Bruno confronts the dark side of success, the gambling habits that threaten his hard-won fortune, the late-night parties that blur into mornings. He fights to stay grounded, leaning on music and the small circle of friends who walk the long road with him. When he headlines the Super Bowl halftime show a few years later, he feels an almost childlike calm. "This is recess," he tells his team, echoing the boy who once performed 2 shows a night before age 10. From the rooftops of Waikiki to the biggest stage on Earth, every step, every setback has led here. And even as the crowd roars, Bruno remembers the peacocks in that abandoned zoo, the moonlit guitar sessions, the taste of cheap tacos after another long day. Those memories are the heartbeat beneath the glitter, the quiet proof that the real story was never just about fame, but about survival, grit, and music powerful enough to carry a kid from Honolulu all the way to the stars.